neck.
The biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized to the right.
I thought he should have punched him in the face. I said, even if you lost, he insulted your wife.
Yes.
He came down the escalator and called Mexicans rapists and murderers. He said, well, what do you think I should have done? I said, I think you should have punched him in the face and then gotten out of the race. You would have been a hero.
I'd like to punch him in the face.
The US FCC is proposing sweeping new rules that would fast-track cell towers into neighborhoods across the country.
That's why we're adding to the FCC's Build America agenda this month. We're going to be voting on 2 new initiatives to accelerate infrastructure builds just like the one we're seeing here. We're taking a look at permitting reform both on the wireline side and the wireless side as well. So we can take the successes in places like here in Malvern, Arkansas, and extend it to communities across the country. Look forward to getting this across the finish line.
And they plan to do it by stripping away local control. That means limiting the power of your city, county, and state to use community-driven rules like setbacks, aesthetics, or protections for environmental or historic areas.
In particular, the notice seeks comment on state and local regulations surrounding the deployment of macro towers, fees, delays, and other barriers to wireless infrastructure construction.
This is an unprecedented power grab. If passed, towers could be automatically approved, even if the community objects.
First, the FCC on my watch will focus on unleashing high-speed infrastructure builds. That means modernizing the regulations that have been driving up costs and holding back internet bills.
The FCC is even considering preempting state and local regulations on artificial intelligence, AI, asking whether it should override any local AI rules that might limit the provider's ability to use AI tools. They also want to narrow the definition of aesthetics, preempt zoning rules, cap local fees, and block communities from requiring independent RF radiation testing.
Our Build America agenda includes efforts to further streamline the many regulations that stand in the way of infrastructure projects. So under my leadership, the FCC will be taking a fresh look at how the agency can use our authorities under the Communications Act, including our authorities in Section 253 and 332, to make it easier to build out internet infrastructure. We're also going to look at NEPA and environmental regulations, which for too long have held back builds, and we have a unique window of opportunity right now, particularly in light of some new Supreme Court decisions, to cut some of the red tape there as well.
This is an industry giveaway, one that the wireless industry has been pushing for years. It is essentially a corporate takeover of our public spaces, giving telecom companies the power to dictate what gets built, where it gets built, and who must live with the consequences. People deserve a voice. Cell towers can drop property values, increase fire risk, contain hazardous materials, and they emit radiation that hundreds of scientists say is not safe. The U.S. hasn't updated its radiation limits since 1996, and a federal court told the FCC to explain how its limits protect children, but the FCC has not responded. We have in the United States limits for cell tower radiation that are 10 to 100 times more lenient than many other countries. Children and families should not be collateral damage in the race to fast-track cell towers. We need to fast-track science-driven protections, oversight, accountability, and transparency, not industry-driven federal preemption. Please join us at Environmental Health Sciences by signing the petition, contacting your state and federal legislatures through our letter writing tool, and talk to your community. Contact your officials. Ask them to submit to the FCC. We must preserve local control when it comes to cell towers, and it will take every one of us. Thank you.
So welcome to the show, Theodora Scarrato. She is a leading expert in environmental health policy related to cell towers. She's co-authored several scientific papers and serves as the special expert to the International Commission on the Biological Effects of Electromagnetic Fields. She, as executive director of the Environmental Health Trust, she led a landmark federal case demonstrating the inadequacy of the FCC's 1996 cell tower radiation exposure guidelines. Welcome to the show, Theodora. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks. I'm really glad to be here.
Now, a lot of people are going to say immediately when you bring this up to them, I know because I lived through COVID, a lot of people are going to call you a conspiracy nut, tinfoil hatter, and there's nothing wrong with cell towers and 5G or any of that. What do you say back to those people?
Well, I would say that there are hundreds of scientists that think otherwise, because this issue has actually been researched for decades. I came upon it 15 years ago only to find scientists have been saying we have a problem that needs to be addressed, going back to the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, because what happened in our country is similar to the history of tobacco or asbestos or lead. The wireless industry is very powerful, and you have a lot of studies. Some show impacts, some don't. If they are industry funded, they more often don't show effects. If they are independently funded, then they more often do show effects. And the thing that I always tell people who are skeptical, and I was so skeptical myself, is that the limits we have for what we're allowed to be exposed to. So from the air, if there's a cell tower, how much are we allowed to be exposed to? The government has laws on that, guidelines that were set in 1996, not even based on long-term impacts. And now we're in a situation, there's no regular requirement for checking what the radiation is. There's been no review by federal agencies for decades. And we're in a situation that I would call a cell tower blitz. We have the FCC wanting to remove basically the ability for cities and towns to control where these go. And there's also congressional proposals moving forward that would do similar things, stripping local control. So there's a lot here. It's like an onion.
So,
actually.
I mean, it just kind of makes sense. So they have guidelines in place for the amount of, what would you call it, radiation? What would you call it?
It's non-ionizing, not the same as nuclear or atomic radiation. It's electromagnetic radiation. And so we call it RF radiation. You can call it that.
And so they already have limits in place for RF radiation, right?
Yes.
So that would mean that the government acknowledges that there's a potential harm from too much RF radiation, correct?
Yes.
But they set the limits way higher than science would actually dictate. Is that what you're saying?
That is what hundreds of scientists say. Let me tell you about the limits that we have. They were set, and the International Commission on the Biological Effects of Electromagnetic Fields has a paper on this, based on a handful of small animal studies where they exposed the animals, 5 monkeys and 8 rats, to high levels of microwaves for under an hour. It is these small animal studies with small sample sizes that they determined what the level of harm would be. And it was when the animals stopped pressing the lever for food, under an hour of an exposure to microwaves, which obviously heat them. So the engineers at that point decided that heating is the effect. The limits we have for cell towers are based on not overheating, but not for long-term effects like cancer, damage to the immune system, reproductive system, genetic impacts, oxidative stress. None of those are considered in the limits we have.
And so the RF that's coming out of the cell towers, is that different? Because I had RFK on the show, and he talked about that your cell phone also emits EMFs, right? And that could also cause cancer, and it's causing brain cancers and tumors in people. That's what, according to RFK, who's now the HHS secretary. So are they different, similar? Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So a tower is connecting to the phone, and the phone is connecting to the tower with invisible electromagnetic signals They're artificial. So when we talk about cell tower radiation, there's both what's coming from the tower. So whether you're using a phone or not, if you have a cell tower in close proximity, you're going to get a higher level than if you're further away. And then your phone also is emitting the same kind. However, it's very intense, like if it's close up to you, and some women put it in their bra, for example, or you're holding it up close, putting it near your head, you're going to get a much higher level absorbed into your body. However, studies have shown that over time, the amount that you absorb from a cell tower in children who aren't using phones a lot, young children, can be more than the amount that they use the phone on a daily basis. But we're having really overlapping types of exposures. We have cell towers, cell phones, the wireless, the Bluetooth, everything, all of these different cameras and smart things, all of it is creating exposures every day. And it's increasing in our lives.
And go ahead.
They're increasing. We have increasing levels from what there were years ago. Yet our limits are from 1996, haven't changed since. And there's been no review by a federal agency on all of the science.
So is there hard science behind the connection between this and cancer, for instance, or any other thing that's harmful?
Yes, there's published, peer-reviewed, credible science, the National Toxicology Program, which is one of the most important and animal test laboratories in the U.S. government that tests all kinds of chemicals and toxins. They did studies on animals, rats and mice, 2-year studies where they exposed the animals for the 2 years and then they sacrificed them and tested them and found what they have deemed as clear evidence of an association with tumors.
Oh, no.
Then the Ramazzini Institute in Italy, which is also an incredible test center where they test animals with different toxins, glyphosate and so forth. And they tested animals with a much lower level of exposure that our FCC limits would consider in compliance in terms of what our cell tower emission levels are, and found the same tumor types as were elevated, as were found in the National Toxicology Program study, which, by the way, are also similar to what in the animals to humans, what humans have, what associations between humans who've used cell phones for long term have also gotten those same tumor types. So there are many scientists who would say that the science is adequate to determine that it is a probable, or some say proven, carcinogen in humans because of the research. Now, what happened was when the NTP, the National Toxicology Program study came out, at that time, the FDA said they didn't agree with the results and that because they were animal studies, it didn't completely translate to humans. What the scientists, the independent scientists have said is that, of course, an animal is not a human, but you do an assessment to determine what the implications are for humans. And they haven't seen that kind of assessment in order to determine what is a level then that is appropriate for humans based on that information. And there's also studies showing oxidative stress, sperm damage, decreased testosterone, all kinds of really a whole myriad, a broad range of effects, including to animals, wildlife.
And so why do you think that? So who is supposed to, in the government, is it the FCC? Is it the FDA? Is it both of them? Who is supposed to be alarmed by this and doing something about it?
That is the best question. And it used to be the EPA, which was researching this and doing the research to develop and identify a safety standard. What is the level that there's harm? And then what do we set it for humans, which is normally lower than the number that they have as the level of harm they found in different studies in order to protect all the population, children, people who are sick. However, when they were amidst actually setting that limit, they were defunded in 1996 when the Telecom Act passed. Heaviest lobbyists, one of the most heavy lobbying time periods at the time, and they were fully defunded from that work. Instead, the FCC, which has the regulatory authority, no health and safety scientists on staff, no public health experts, no medical doctors, they then adopted limits that had really been developed much earlier based on this, that heating is the only harm. That's how we got our limits. They are not safety standards. They were not developed by federal agencies. And when it comes to cell tower radiation, as far as I know, there is no agency that's looking at all of the science on that.
And so have you talked to anybody in any of these regulatory bodies inside the government?
Well, when I wrote the EPA, and this was a part of our lawsuit, the federal lawsuit that you were talking about in the intro, about this issue, they said the last time that they looked at the science was decades ago, and they said that they were not doing any research. This was a few years ago. I don't know if it's changed because I haven't heard anything, if it has. And they referred me to their 1985 review of the biological effects of EMFs. So that was key in our lawsuit, because when the FCC said a few years ago in 2019, we don't need to update their limits, we sued along with many petitioners. And the FCC did not win the case. They were ordered to address the evidence that they had ignored, which was impacts to children, long-term effects, environmental effects, how we have limits from 1996, before there even was a smartphone or Internet of Things, how technology changed. And they have not responded to the court. They were ordered to explain how their limits were adequately protective. So if their limits are so protective, why can't they just explain? Why can't they issue a report or something showing how their limits are adequate?
So they're ignoring the court order?
Yes, since 2021.
And so what's the redress that you have when they don't follow a court? Isn't the court supposed to do something about that?
Well, in cases like these, it can actually take years. This is not untypical. They didn't appeal to the Supreme Court. I don't think they would have won. So that means that the order stands. And there have been motions that have been filed. Way back, several years ago, we filed a motion. I know EHT has filed a motion. Children's Health Defense has filed a motion. So I am actually a petitioner in the case as well, in addition to being in the organization that was a petitioner. And what you do next is you can then sue again and end up in court. But the judge could say this issue is not right for me to rule. You have to give them time. Agencies, there's deference to agencies. They don't expect, they give them this time. So I think the time is now for them to respond, because here they are. They're fast tracking cell towers. That's what the FCC is doing. And in the video that you saw, there's been a comment period where people can comment and put in what they think about this proposal to fast track cell towers. And many, hundreds, there are about 5,000 comments, and many of them said, you need to deal with the court order before you can fast track all of these cell towers, because we know it will elevate the level that we're exposed to.
And do you think that'll have any effect, that public commentary?
Well, I think what needs to happen is a full and frank airing of this whole issue, which we haven't had. A transparent process by which all of the science can be laid out on the table, discussed, evaluated, and that's the first step. I mean, we also need to be reducing exposure. What scientists are saying is we should reduce exposure instead of increase it. We shouldn't be introducing all these new technologies. We're now onto 6G. There are pulling in different frequencies, different modulations that have been untested for safety, because there is no pre-market safety testing for long-term exposure in this country.
So people, you can't really do anything to protect yourself from cell towers, or can you?
Well, you can. There is shielding, but it's tricky, and sometimes it can cause more problems than not. So, some people move. They try not to live close to towers. Some people are in situations, apartment buildings where there's an antenna right outside their window, and there's not much they can do. So people who have the means move, but you can reduce your exposure by, not putting the phone to your head. And there's a lot of tips and tricks we have at Environmental Health Sciences if you're interested. But where we are is that the cell towers, if this passes, if the FCC moves forward with what it's doing, and Congress, you're going to have little say when a cell tower is proposed in your community.
Do you have any faith, hope, or prediction that this is going to turn out the right way and that the local municipalities will have more power, or is this going to just be steamrolled?
Well, I can't say what's going to happen, but I do know that when people wake up to this, they get organized on it. And there are people organized across the country. So, other countries we have such high, you talked about it, and I talked about it in the video, but we allow the highest level of radiation compared to many other countries. Many countries have no cell towers at schools, or have it be at a distance from a school or a home. We don't have any protections in place. And when people have cell towers going up in front of their homes, they get organized, they get their community organized, and then I believe something gets done when people get on this issue. I do not believe all hope is lost. I believe this is actually a wake-up call.
And do you have a website people can go to?
Yes, Environmental Health Sciences, ehsciences.org, and we also have a wireless and EMF program. And you can search cell towers to see the information on cell towers and what you can do, how to get involved on the issue. So there's a lot.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I appreciate you being on this and bringing this to my attention. And now we can bring it to everybody who watches this show's attention, and they can get involved and organize. And maybe we could take back some power. Theodora Scorado, I really appreciate you coming on. Anything you'd like to say before we say goodbye?
I just want to say thank you for having me on. And the next step is also having the industry compete on safety, because that's the way we're also going to push this mountain. There are ways, there are solutions to this issue that R&D can solve. There can be much less radiation, and still you can use your technology. So a lot of solutions.
Okay. Well, fingers crossed they do some of those solutions. I really appreciate you coming on, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Let's take a break, and we'll be right back.